Welcome to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor at the Herald Democrat, Jason Della Rosa, and we are entering the second week of the high school football playoffs, week 13 for those counting at home, and we still have several teams from the Texoma area still alive and kicking. What we're going to do this week is, since we are in the second week of the playoffs, we had some teams that did not advance. We'll touch on them real quick, and then we will get into the matchups for this weekend. The first team that we're going to talk about that did not make it to the second round is the White Tigers. They had a 52-47 loss against Harmony. This was a game a lot closer than some people expected because you had Harmony, who was the district champion in 6-2A, going up against White, who was the fourth seed out of, in 10-3A Division 2, and you had White as the fourth seed as the District 9 3A bracket was put together. And this was a game that was very back and forth. Had a lot of crazy things happen in the first half, especially in the first quarter. Onside kicks. Both teams had fumbles that they lost. It was just kind of a crazy game, as any 52-47 game probably is. And White was able to hang tough. Marshall Mangrum, he finished the game with 416 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. Caden Caraway had 5 catches for 155 yards and 2 TDs. Trevor McCartney had 4 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. Colin Watson added a touchdown catch. Dylan Cordell, his only catch was a touchdown catch. It was very opposites attracting. You had Harmony, which ran for 425 yards, and obviously, like I mentioned, Mangum threw for 416. White only ran for 16 yards. They only tried to run 17 times, and a couple of those were sacks. So they kind of saw how they were going to be able to move the ball, and there was a lot of big plays. It was a 51-yard touchdown pass to McCartney. One of Caraway's was a 51-yarder, which was a one-hander. It was a very nice catch. His other TD was a 32-yarder. Cordell's was a 29-yarder. Coming into the middle of the third quarter, White was down. They were down 3 touchdowns, and they were able to get back in it. Riley Evans had a 23-yard interception return for a score, and that allowed the Tigers to score the final 3 touchdowns of the third quarter, get back in it, and they had a chance to go ahead. They weren't able to. Harmony was able to extend their lead. And then White had scored in the final minute. They had an onside kick, weren't able to get that. But that was a good first season for the Tigers under head coach Kevin Wiggins. They finished 5-6. The last two years, they'd only won 2 games each season. They made the playoffs. So things are looking bright. They're obviously going to have to replace some guys. Mangrum is one of the guys who graduates, so they're going to need a new quarterback. Dylan Cordell, the running back, who almost had a 1,000-yard season, he's going to graduate as well. A couple of the receivers will be gone, but they have a good nucleus there, and they got a taste of winning, so that's always a good thing going forward. And we'll see what realignment does for them, if that can help them in any way. 2 other teams also were eliminated last week. The next one of those was Tom Bean. They lost to Rivercrest 74-30. This was a game where Rivercrest was up 38-8 at halftime and just kind of continued to pour things on in that game. Obviously, defense was an issue. Rivercrest ran for 623 yards. Tom Bean, no slouches on offense themselves. They almost had 400 yards of offense. Just they couldn't keep matching Rivercrest. Ryan Weems finished the game. He threw for 141 yards and had 2 touchdown passes. 1 touchdown pass. He ran for 2 touchdowns in the game, finishing. Let me find that there with 104 yards on 13 carries. Caleb Graham added 18 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown. Leading the way receiving was Lance Pauler, 5 catches for 105 yards, and the touchdown grab. So that's a team in Tom Bean. They get off to a bad start, made some personnel changes. switch some things up. And once they got into district, they put things together. They were able to finish second in the district. They had a chance to play for the district title against Valley View, and that was the second straight season that they made the playoffs. That hadn't been done since 2003, 2004. So that's a nice building block as well. You talk about a team that finished 4-7, but did some good things. Like we mentioned, the latter half of the season was much better than the first half. And so I'm interested to see if they can go for a third straight playoff appearance. Their situation is going to be interesting with realignment. Valley View, like we mentioned, the district champ, they're expected to move up to Class 3A in the next realignment. So it'll be interesting to see what is left over in their district. Collinsville in their district could move down depending on what the cutoff is. We'll find that out in a couple weeks, what the cutoffs are. And one of the teams that they could be battling for a playoff spot is the next team we're going to mention, Tioga. They lost in their 2A Division II by-district game against Detroit, 66-42. Again, this is another area team that had a good season, especially based on what they did the year before. The year before, we've talked about with them before, they only won one game. This year, they won 3. Unfortunately, they were not able to get their first victory as an 11-man team after having so much success in 6-man moving up before last season. This was definitely a shootout. Tioga finished with 390 yards. 250 of that came through the air. Reagan Mejia came back at quarterback. He threw for 244 of those yards. A lot of that was to Caleb McKinney, who had 4 catches for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Logan Westbrook had 3 catches for 75 yards. Marshall Elise had 3 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 2 touchdowns. And Caleb Scott finished with 12 carries for 81 yards. So the offense was there. Defense obviously was an issue. This was a game that at halftime was 28-22. So it was pretty close the whole way. Detroit gained a little bit of an edge going into the fourth quarter, and they scored 24 of their points there in the fourth quarter. And Tioga was only able to score twice there. But again, some good things from the Bulldogs. They had some injuries they had to deal with. They had to move some people around, but they were still able to get third place in the district, which was an improvement over fourth from last year. And we'll see what realignment does with them. They're definitely going to move up into 2A Division I. The question is going to be, would they be a natural fit with the district that is Tom Bean, Collinsville, Celeste, and Trenton, to just replace Valley View. It'll be interesting to see what happens with them. But those 3 teams were able to make the playoffs. In some cases, repeat with the playoffs, but seemingly have some better success along the way. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with them going forward. So that means there are 6 teams left in the playoffs. There is only one Thursday game, so we'll start with that. That is going to be Collinsville versus San Saba. That is a 2A Division I Region 2 area game. That game is at Mineral Wells at 7 o'clock on Thursday night. Collinsville comes in at 6-5. San Saba is 11-0. Collinsville barely hung on to advance. Not only did they have to get a field goal in the final minutes to take the lead, they ended up blocking a field goal as time expired to win 15-14 against Wolf City. Collinsville has played these tight defensive battles, these low-scoring games for the most part this season, and they were able to do it again. They beat a team. Wolf City came in at 8-2, kind of viewed as the favorite. Obviously, Collinsville was the 3 seed, so they're playing a district runner-up, and they were able to pull that game out. It was nip and tuck the whole way, but Collinsville, the defense in the second half shut out Wolf City, and of course Wolf City nearly got the shutout. The only points they allowed in the second half was that field goal, and then with 2 minutes to go. So that's a game where it could have gone either way. Collinsville was able to come away with the win, even though it struggled at times on offense. It was the fourth straight time they made the second round, and if Pirates are able to pull off another upset, they'd be in the third round, the region semifinals, for the first time since 2013. But to do so, they're going to have to give San Saba its first loss. They opened the playoffs last week with a 57-20 victory against Riesel. Their main playmaker is quarterback Sean O'Keefe. He's thrown 20 touchdown passes, and he's run for 22 touchdowns. So he's probably going to be the focal point. You're going to have to try to slow him down. I don't know if you could stop him, but definitely try to slow him down. And the winner of this game will face the De Leon Rivercrest winner in the region semifinals. If Collinsville does advance, Rivercrest is the team out of Wolf City's district, so that might be a gauge for that if that does end up happening. But it's going to be a tough matchup for the Pirates. But either way, getting back to the second round again in first-year head coach Garrett Patterson's return to his alma mater. That's a good start. And like I said, they're sitting at 6-5, so guaranteed to not have a losing record. That's always something you wanna strive for. And we'll see if they can pull off another upset. Speaking of teams that pulled off upsets, the Whitesboro Bearcats are going to try to do that for the second straight week. This is a 3A Division I Region 1 area matchup between Whitesboro and Bushland. This game is at 7 o'clock on Friday at Iowa Park. So another nice road trip as the joys of being in Region 1 for Whitesboro. Last week they had to go to Graham, and that's where they beat Eastland 30-21. And they are now 7-4. They are taking on Bushland, who is 11-0, and Bushland won 70-8 against Tornillo. So again, if the Bearcats are going to advance, it's gonna be probably a bigger upset than last week. And last week was a pretty big upset. It was, if it wasn't the biggest win from a shocking standpoint in 3A last week, it's definitely top three. Eastland came into that matchup last week, as we talked about. They were 9-1. Their only loss had been to the number one team in the state, in Wall, who's in their district. And they only lost to them by 2 touchdowns. And Eastland was ranked, I believe, 9th, 7th. I think they were 9th in the last week, the final regular season poll. So that was a top 10 team, and Whitesboro was able to come away with the victory there. They did it basically more or less with their defense, because they got 2 interception returns for touchdowns in that game. The first was Jacob Smith returning an interception 52 yards to open the scoring, and then when Eastland was driving to try to win the game, Sutton Furman provided some insurance with a 60-yard interception return. That was after Jorge Montes had kicked a 39-yard field goal earlier in the third quarter. Eastland had the lead 21-20 after 3 quarters. Montes kicks the 39-yard field goal to put Whitesboro up 23-21, and then Furman finishes it off with the interception return to make it a 2-score game. Cade Acker finished with 19 carries for 83 yards and a touchdown. He also threw a 12-yard touchdown pass to Tristan Gaines. Acker threw for 148 yards. He completed 8 of 13 passes. Gaines had 7 catches for 101 yards in the TD. Kason Todd had 2 catches for 67 yards and also ran 3 times for 55 yards. So some big chunk plays from him to kind of keep things moving. And then, like I said, that was a big shocking upset, especially in Region 1. I'm sure a lot of people thought it would be Eastland and Bushland meeting this week. Whitesboro's trying to reach the third round for the second time in 3 seasons. So they're sitting at 7-4. If they get to 8 wins, that'll be the 5th time in school history that the Bearcats have gotten at least 8 wins in a season. And this is the best start Bushland has ever had. They're matching what they've done since 2009. That's the last time they started 11-0. And the winner of this game will face the Denver City Brock winner in the region semifinals. Obviously, if Whitesboro and Brock win, that's a repeat from district play. It would also mean a game much closer than they would play if they were to face Denver City. So I don't think the Bearcats are going to be intimidated. They've obviously knocked off a really good opponent. This is same caliber of an opponent if not better. So will be interesting to see if Whitesboro can shock 3A for a second straight week and get to the third round. The next matchup that we have in 3A Division 1, this is a Region 2 area matchup. This is Pottsboro against Sabine. This is a game at 7:30 on Friday in Paris. Pottsboro comes in at 11-0. They're coming off a 63-0 win against Kemp. And Sabine is not far behind. They're 10-1. They were able to beat Mount Vernon 20-14 in a close game last week. And so this is one of those matchups in the second round that you look at the records and go, man, why is this a second round matchup? This should be a third round or even a region final type of a matchup. And so I think there's a chance Pottsboro could get tested for the first time in a while. They've obviously been rolling. Last week, the win 63-0. Again, that ties the school record for points in a season. Something that they had done earlier this year. It's the largest margin of victory in school history in a single game, playoffs or regular season combined. It also allowed the Cardinals to break the school record for points in a season. They now have 529, and they broke the record of the 2015 team, which had 525. So scoring points has not been a problem. Giving up points has not been an issue either. But this is a matchup that's going to be interesting for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you're facing a 10-1 team who's very good, but this is the first time that Sabine has ever won a playoff game. It's also the first time they've ever won double digits games in a season. So you have a program coming in that's feeling really good about itself. Like we said, they were able to win a game against Mount Vernon last week, to do something they've never done before. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. To touch on Pottsboro's game last week, like we said, it was 63-0. It was 63-0 after the third quarter, and it was 35. Is that third? No, I'm sorry. It's 45-0 at halftime. It was a game that, like I said, Kemp came in with a losing record, so they didn't look like they were going to give a lot of resistance, and in the end they didn't. Pottsboro finished with 440 yards, split pretty evenly. They ran for 210 yards, and they threw for 230 yards. Braden Plyler was 12 of 17 passing for 179 of those yards, and he had 3 touchdown passes. He also ran for 2 scores. He finished with 16 carries for 106 yards. Cooper Townsley added a score on the ground. Titus Lyons caught a touchdown pass from Jet Carroll, and so he's continuing his good season. And Riley Deaton returned a fumble, 6 yards for a score. So Zach Weidman and Jason Hooker had the touchdown catches in the first half. So an all-around effort from the Cardinals. They held Kemp to 75 yards total, including 29 carries for 59 yards. So that went about as many people expected. And I'm sure Pottsboro is the slight favorite, but this is, like I said, this is a game. If it's in the balance in the fourth quarter, it would not surprise a lot of people because you have 2 teams that are probably expecting to win, and like I said, for Sabine, it's house money for them. They had never won a playoff game, and now they've got one under their belt. The winner of this will face the Malakoff-Jefferson winner in the region semifinals. If I had to guess, it might be Malakoff. They're ranked number 1 in Division 1. So if anything, if Malakoff doesn't advance, that would be a surprise. And the third matchup in 3A Division 1 Region 2 is Van Alstyne against Gladewater. This is a game that's at 7:30 on Friday, and they're playing out at Emory Rains. Van Alstyne comes into the matchup at 7-4, while Gladewater's sitting at 8-3. The Panthers won last week 69-27 against Life Oak Cliff, while Gladewater won 32-0 against Hugh Springs. So Van Alstyne had continually made the playoffs, something we touched on last week. They got their first playoff win since 2013, and they were trying to get to the region semifinals for the first time since 2001. Gladewater is having one of its better seasons. This is their most wins with the 8 that they have so far. It's their most wins in a season in 3 years, and they're coming off obviously a shutout against Hugh Springs. So it'll be interesting to see what they have. If they can slow down Van Alstyne. Their passing attack has been really on fire. It's been very efficient the last couple of weeks. And what they did against the Life Oak Cliff is no exception. Again, you put up 69 points. That's a playoff points record. It's the most points they've ever scored in the playoffs, and they did it, through, it. The overall numbers show, almost 600 yards, and only 239 of that was passing. But Timothy Rosenthal, again, very efficient, 13 of 14 passing for 239 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns. He also ran for a score. And so really some big plays in the passing game. Cam Montgomery had 5 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown. Draylon Davis didn't find the end zone, but his 3 catches covered 89 yards. And then in the run game, very spread out because of the lopsided nature of this was a game that was 41-6 at halftime. And so Jake Carroll had 6 carries for 89 yards and 3 touchdown runs. And Paul Laughlin had 4 carries for 85 yards and a score. Jaden Mahan had 11 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown. And Zach Smith had 4 carries for 47 yards and a score. So, really spread out, which is what you would expect in a game where you can roll up those kind of numbers. Life Oak Cliff did put up over 400 yards of offense. A lot of that was, you don't want to say garbage time, but their three of their 4 touchdowns came in the second half, and it also came after Van Alstyne was up 49-6. So I'm sure there were some subs in there. Obviously you don't want to get anybody hurt. You want to just kind of get through the end of the game, get to next week. Speaking of next week, the winner of this is going to play the Winsboro-Dallas-Madison winner in the region semifinals. So that's that. Whoever wins there, that'll be an interesting matchup as well. We'll jump down now to Class 3A Division 2 in Region 2, where we have Gunner against Clifton in the area round. That's a 7:30 Friday start, and that game is going to be at Waxahachie. Gunner is 10-1 after their 53-7 win against Toller. Clifton had to survive 28-27 in overtime against Edgewood, and they improved to 8-3. This is an interesting matchup. Clifton had a really good season last year as well, and the way that played out, there was a chance that these teams could have met in this round last year, but they were actually Clifton was able to beat Lexington. They're in that district, for those Gunner fans who remember how tough Lexington was last year. Should be interesting to see what happened. Clifton was able to score first in overtime, and then Edgewood went for 2 in the win instead of going to a second overtime, and obviously the Cubs were able to stop that and advance. Gunner had a pretty easy time with Toller. It was 53-7. It was a game where you look at the halftime score of this game. It was 36-7. Toller actually it was tied 7-7 in the first quarter. And then Gunner kind of just pulled away from there. Toller couldn't run the ball at all. They had 18 carries for 37 yards, only finished with 7 first downs. They only had 168 yards total and 3 turnovers. So it was a game where Gunner kind of did what they did. They get up early and kind of go from there. It's the 4th straight 10-win season for the Tigers. That's the most in school history. The last time they had won 3 straight was 07-09. And so they're at 4 and counting. It's also the 3rd straight game that Gunner has scored at least 50 points, and they've scored at least 49 points 6 times. So teams have got to, if you're going to beat Gunner, you got to find a way to slow them down. Pottsboro was able to do that in handing them their only loss, and they still scored a couple touchdowns. So you've really got your work cut out with this team. Hudson Graham had the big game in this one. He threw 3 touchdown passes, and threw for 195 yards. He also ran for a score. And so things are really clicking with them. His touchdown passes, he had 1 to David Denton, 1 to Cade Roller, and 1 to Peyton Lowe. Lowe also had a touchdown run. Clayton Reed scored on the ground, and Denton also caught a touchdown pass from Mitchell Brewer. And so that's how they kind of throw in Logan Hubbard, because he kicked a field goal to get him to the 53. So it should be an interesting matchup. The winner of this will face the Jacksboro-Rogers winner in the region semifinals. If it is Jacksboro and Gunner, Gunner has played them in the playoffs before, so that's a familiar opponent. So we'll see what happens on that in that little pot of the bracket, and if we get some familiarity in the second round, or if it might be a new opponent. And the last matchup for this week is a Class 3A Division II Region 3 area round game. This is between Bells and Elysian Fields. This is at 7:30 on Friday at Mineola. Bells is 8-3 after their 36-32 win against Winona, and Elysian Fields won 74-50 against Hemphill, and they're 7-4. This is a matchup. This could be a high-scoring matchup. This has the potential to be another shootout, kind of like what Bells was in last week. Although the scoring was not as high as you would think. It was 36-32, and it was back and forth, and it was a lot of it was late. It was only 6-0. Winona had the lead after the first quarter. But some crazy things happened. There was a lot of extra points. Winona was able to get a kickoff return for a touchdown. They were able to get 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown. And so they were able to take advantage of special teams to kind of keep it close. But Bells was able to hang on. They did that by running for 419 yards on 68 carries. Wrangler Priest led the way. He had 32 of those carries for 229 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bo Baker, he ran 15 times for 99 yards and had 2 touchdown runs. Connor Morris had 7 carries for 57 yards. Kind of keep things moving. The biggest thing in this one was when Bells was aggressive and went for it on 4th down, a lot of 4th and shorts. They kept it with Wrangler Priest. He picked up 5 first downs when Bells was facing a 4th down play. When they gave him the ball, he got the first down every time he touched it in 4th down, and that was able to keep drives alive. They were able to burn the clock, especially at the end. Winona scored with 5:19 left, and they had the kick blocked when they were trying to make it a 3-possession game. So they had the onside kick to try to get the ball back, because I don't think they thought they were going to get the ball back if they just kicked it deep, and they were right, because Bells ran out the final 5:19 with that slot T offense. They were just able to straight ahead, pick up yards, extend drives, keep Winona off the field for a lot of that, and that's why they were able to hold a 13-8 lead at halftime, and they were able to extend that in the third quarter. Going to be a little bit of a different animal, I think, this week with the Elysian Fields. I mean, obviously they can score. Like I said, they had 74 points last week. Ryan Wilkerson is their quarterback. He's a dual threat kind of a guy, very dangerous. And like we mentioned, it could be a shootout because Elysian Fields has already played a game this year where they've given up 70 points. So they've scored 70 points in a game. They've given up 70 points in a game. And so that will be interesting for them. The big thing with the Panthers, they're doing this in the first year under Dale West. They continue to add to what this season means in historical standard for the program. The win last week was only their second playoff win ever. A victory would put Bells in the third round, the region semifinals, for just the second time ever, and the first time since 1989. The crazy thing about that 1989 group, that team didn't even win a playoff game. Here's the fun fact about that group. So back then, they got a first-round bye for winning the district, which is what you would get if you were a district champion. You would get a first-round bye. That's also a time where you could tie games. There was no overtime, and in the second round of the playoffs, Bells earned a tie, and the tiebreaker was penetrations. Every time you got inside your opponent's 20, you essentially got a point. They counted that as one penetration. And so you would add those up, and whoever had the advantage on penetrations would advance. So, and then that team made the third round and lost. So that team had a tie, and then lost in the third round. So this group is trying to get as far as that 1989 team did. And a victory would also give the Panthers 9 wins, and that's the first time that would happen in a season since 1997. So a lot of things are happening that haven't happened in a really long time for Bells, and it'll be interesting to see if they can keep it going. This looks, obviously, 8-3 versus 7-4. It looks like a even matchup on paper, but like I said, we're going to get to that point here where everybody's going to start getting really good, especially next week. And so it'll be interesting to see how these teams match up. This strikes me as whoever gets like consecutive stops in the second quarter, or forces a turnover, or gets a special teams, like I said, a kickoff return or a punt return, or maybe blocks a punt or something. That might be the difference in this game, and allow the tide to turn. And whoever wins this game will be playing the Big Sandy Harmony Paul Pewitt winner in the region semifinals. If it is Bell's Harmony, there will be that baseline. White played them Harmony close as the 4 seed against the 1. Of course, Bell's was pushed by Winona, who was the 4th seed in Big Sandy Harmony. So that could be a very interesting matchup once we get there next week. But that will be for next week. That will be week 14. We still have some great games, I think, that are going to happen this week. So we will see who wins. We will see who is still playing as we get past Thanksgiving. As we like to say, there are never any turkeys past Thanksgiving. So it'll be interesting to see who can advance from this group of 6. The prevailing wisdom is if you can get half of whatever's left still alive, that's a good week. And that was kind of the thing last week. We had 9 teams playing last week, and 6 of them advanced. So that's a good record for the first round. We'll see who of these 6 can get to play after Thanksgiving. So thanks for tuning in and checking us out, and we will be back next week, and we'll see who is still playing. Halfway to the state title game will be in action next week. Thanks a lot.